Welcome to the Weights and Plates podcast. I am Robert Santana. I am your host, along with Trent Jones, my co-host.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
Good evening.
We record these in the evenings, or at least it's the evening for me. You'll have to forgive me today. I'm not drinking whiskey. I'm drinking an herbal tea because since we last attempted to record, I've contracted a cold, and it's annoying as fuck. I actually don't feel bad. Like physically, I'm a little tireder than normal, but I just my sinuses are just like balloons, like just so many expanded balloons inside my head. And Forgive me, my normal mellifluous voice is not with me today. You'll just have to deal with my nasal croaking over here.
We attempted to record.
This is number 2.
So it took 70 episodes for me, not Trent, he would never make such a mistake, to forget to press the record button on our recording software. So we filmed it, we did it, and then at the end, I was like, oh, wow, dude, I didn't record any of that.
Hey, I'd like to say that I've never done that before, but I totally have. So it's all right. Everybody gets one.
Yeah.
It's like in Family Guy.
That was mine. 69 in a row.
That's right. Yeah. You just wanted to hang on that number 69 a little bit longer.
Yeah, maybe I botched it on purpose subconsciously, so I can say I got 69 in a row,
if we don't release another podcast, we'll just end on 69. Nice. Well, so the topic that we wanted to that we discussed at great length in the episode that we will not be releasing because it didn't record. We were talking about something. We realized, we haven't gotten into the psychology as much of lifting heavy, and we realized as we talked about this that there's some meat on the bone here. That let's say that hopefully you have listened to us and you have bought into the fact that if you want to build a muscular physique that quote unquote looks like you train, you're going to have to lift heavy weights. And the best way to do that is to focus on the big compound lifts, right? We've covered that ad nauseum, right? You need to squat, you need to press, you need to bench press, you need to deadlift, and you need to add weight to the bar on a regular basis, drive those numbers up.
That's right.
But, one of the things, like if you're new to this, though, one of the things that most people don't have experience with is training in this high-intensity manner. And when I say high intensity, I mean something very specific by that. By high intensity, I mean lifting heavy weights. When the weight gets very heavy, we would consider this high-intensity exercise. As opposed to, let's say, endurance exercise, which is low intensity. It doesn't mean it's easy. It can be very hard. Running a marathon is very hard, or at least it is for me. I've only run a half marathon. I've never run a full marathon. A half marathon was hard enough. Okay, so it has nothing to do with being hard in a subjective sense, but it's low intensity. On the other hand, doing a heavy set of 5 on the squat, that is a very, very high intensity event, and it's a completely different feeling than doing a marathon or a half marathon or even a 5K. And most people, just based on the level of physical education that we have in the modern Western world, have very little, if no experience with doing true high intensity work in the gym. So we wanted to talk about that today.
Yeah, that concisely summed it up because we went on a few tangents to get there. So I kind of like how Trent just did that because now I know where I want to go. So, I think that a lot of people, when they're thinking of things that are physically hard, they're thinking of enduring something, right? It's kind of goes to the name, endurance exercise, right? But not just, lifting. Like you think about thing that jumps in my mind is not even physical. It's, when I did a PhD, when I finished it, everybody was saying the guy who finishes is the guy with the most endurance, right? So I had to endure shitty conditions of sorts for several years, and deal with that. And that's hard, it's definitely hard. And it's the same thing if you're running, 26 miles or even a mile, right? Like 1 mile. It's, it's short distance, relatively speaking, but it's not a sprint, right? Running 1 mile, you're enduring it. Like when I was in high school, I remember that third or fourth lap around the track, my quads were burning up pretty bad,
Right. Yeah.
and my lungs were on fire,
minutes. The average person's that's gonna take 7 to 10 minutes to run that mile. It's a long duration.
Yeah, or as a swimmer, I did a 500 freestyle. That was long.
Oh yeah, long swims are just those are awful. I'd rather run a half marathon than do a long swim.
So for those of you unfamiliar with swimming, and my high school pool is 25 yards. So that would say that's quote unquote the shorter pool if you've seen a lap pool, right? And the meter pool is the longer pool. That's what you see the Olympics, right? So we had a 25-yard pool. So a 500-yard freestyle was 20 laps, right? And I lost count once. I thought I was done, but I was actually getting lapped by the guys that were super fast. Then I stopped, and I'm like, oh, shit. They're like, no, you got 2 more. Everybody's cracking up, right? It's that damn ADHD. But it was hard. I actually didn't mind the 500 so much. It was the 200 that drove me nuts because that was 8 laps, middle distance, kind of like running. Middle distance is the fucking worst.
Like an 800 meter, it's like, is it a sprint? Yes. Is it long distance? Yes.
Yeah. I prefer the 50s at the end. I like the 100 for a while because, you're
like a drag racing car in the water.
Pretty much, yeah. It's kind of like, in lifting, people pay attention to, let's say, their deadlift, right? 500 deadlift. If you were a swimmer, a high school swimmer, especially if you didn't have a history of swimming, before high school, like some of these guys have been doing it since they were 4. I was not. I started when I was 15. And, you get fixated on the 100 because first you want to break a minute. You're like 14. You're mediocre. Some of these guys break a minute their first year, of course. But I'm talking about your mediocre swimmers that are kind of new to it. not super fast. Like, I want to get under a minute. Then you get under a minute. Then it's like, I want to get more and more and more. And then I guess these really fast guys will get under 50 seconds. I think I don't know what the world record is, the mid to low 40s. And that's 4 laps of the pool, right? So that's when it starts to it's kind of a sprint, but it's kind of not. Because the first 2 laps are the sprint, then you got 2 more. So that's when you start to have to pace yourself, right? My point is that I think when you talk to the average person, they can come up with a lot of examples of things they've had to endure, where it's like, I held out and just sucked this up for, however long, right. 26-mile marathon, a 500-meter swim, a PhD program, whatever. They're thinking of long periods of time of enduring sustainable pain, right?
Yeah.
But that is very different than when you have to do an all-out exertion all at once. It's a different experience. So the analogy I like to give, and what kind of inspired the podcast is, it's become quite fashionable to train in a way that simulates some sort of endurance activity, like CrossFit. If you really think about what CrossFit is, it's endurance. You're
right.
Endurance with weights. But it's endurance. You're doing things if you're doing things continuously for time, it's endurance. It's an endurance component
with a little strength thrown in, but not the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah. If the focus is time, it's endurance. If the focus is load, it's going to be more strength, right? And that's kind of how I like to explain it. I remember once in an exercise physiology class or a muscle physiology class, there was a question about, okay, well, 1 RM is the strength measure. What's a good measure of endurance? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe a 20 RM squat. We're talking about muscular endurance, right? And he's like, well, an AMRAP would probably be better because, if you put a cap on it, then it becomes more about the weight. And I saw his point, so I've always kind of kept that analogy in the back of my mind. But whatchamacallit, yeah, if the load is the focus and it's about lifting as much load as possible, it's a strength stimulus, right? And if the time is the variable, then it's an endurance focus, right?
Yeah.
Or number of reps, like you can make that argument too, if you're trying to accumulate more reps and it's, you're trying to increase your endurance, right? And it's just easier to experience endurance in life. Often you lifting something so heavy that you only do it once for a few seconds, it just doesn't happen,
Right. Yeah,
I mean, it does, but you know what I mean.
You're talking about the endurance thing, and I was trying to think about, what was my earliest experience with endurance events? I wouldn't say training because I wasn't training then, but I remember in PE. I grew up in the 90s,
Same
primary educational system, and the PE classes I think this was like the introduction of standardized testing everywhere, right? In Texas, we had the TOS test or TAX test. I can't remember what it was at the time. They changed the acronyms 10 times, but we had that in our academic classes. But then they eventually introduced some standardized testing in PE as well. And I remember, I don't know, 4th grade, 5th grade, something like that. They started making us do these tests where we had to do timed runs. And one of them was we had to run from one end of the gym to the other end of the gym. And there was a test tone that would play on the PA.
Oh, I remember this.
Did you do this? The beep?
Dude, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you got to run to the other side of the gym and it would beep. And the first beep is like 20 seconds. I mean, it gives you forever, right? So you're just sitting there, checking your watch. Beep. And then you got to run to the other side. And then as you do more laps, the beeps get progressively shorter until, like I think I got like 70 something laps or something. I was one of the top 10, kids. Just because I was into that stuff, I just like to push myself and just see what I could do. Not because I was particularly good at it, but that was probably one of the earliest experiences I had is in PE, they started introducing standardized testing and it was endurance based. And then as I got into middle school and high school, junior high and high school, we had track and field, and I played football. That was my main sport, and baseball, which not really very endurance based, but they encouraged us to go out for the track and field stuff. And so we'd start running. I'd have to run cross country. I never competed in it, but I had to train with it. And I think that's most sports, even football to some extent. Even
that's an endurance
football
component.
they would train in that way, right? Where they'd be like, all right, it's January. We're in the off-season conditioning program. We're running 3 miles today, and it's just like some big-ass laps around the entire school complex. And so there you go. On the flip side, what kind of experience did I have early on of moving very heavy weights? And I can't think of much. I think if you're a city dweller like I was, that's probably true of your experience. If you don't have implements or you just have very basic stuff, we'd have like balls we could throw and, stuff like that. But that was it. You pretty much running on some sort of course is like the most basic exercise you can get a bunch of kids to do in public school. I think that's interesting that if we roll the clock back, 100 years, 150 years, 200 years for sure, when most of us would be living in a more agrarian society, I think you would have a lot of kids who would understand strength training much more intuitively, because think about what a kid does on a farm since they're little. They're picking up heavy sacks of seed. You got an 80-pound
baling hay.
Little kid picking up 50-pound sacks of seed and hauling around. Yeah, baling hay, pitching vegetables and fruits up into a truck or a cart. There's a lot more physical, or even dealing with animals, when you got to work around very heavy, powerful animals, you got to use some force. So it's funny. I think that's probably flipped, in the last 100 years, where public education has become, the norm for most people. So I don't think it was always this way, but it certainly is now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, now people look at strength as like, and I think some of this is changing, but as like a circus sideshow, And I think we talked about this Friday, it's like you take a guy who, can do all this endurance stuff, like, what's his name? Froning, the CrossFitter, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Like he's just he's the quintessential quote unquote modern athlete, right? That people think of, right? Like super lean, can run around, jump around. Yeah, got abs, can run around, jump around, lift stuff up, and can do all this stuff, right? And, there's certainly value there. I'm not saying that you should be deconditioned and be a big, strong power lifter. But unless you're doing that, you're competing in that, of course. But there's just this heavy emphasis on cardio. The focus is, he can just keep going. He can just move. He can jump. He's so light on his feet. Like all this fucking bullshit, right? And it's like, okay, well, what if, a 450-pound guy falls on him? Yeah,
right.
I don't know what his PRs are. Maybe he can get out of that. He might be strong enough to do that. But, I'm just giving a broad example, right? I'm not talking about that guy specifically, but there's a lot of people that aspire for that. They want to like do all these things at once. But what we got to understand is a guy like that is born that way, right? And he's responsive to various types of training. He improves at all of it. That's why he's good at CrossFit. There's certain people that can do that. I got a friend who's, our colleague, Brian Fox, he's in the Army Special Forces, right? The guy was fast. He was explosive. And then when he had to do endurance, he, white knuckled it, got it done. He's running 20 miles and squatting over 500 for reps,
Right, yeah.
And he has a 38-inch vertical jump. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, yeah, no, that makes me think of, when we think of popular culture, what are the physical feats that are celebrated, and again, most people nowadays are not participating in, intense physical culture, but they're watching it in popular media. And dude, it's military, right? You think about the military, everybody knows about the Navy SEAL, BUDS course. Like every dude has watched there was a documentary like 20 years ago about like the Navy SEALs going through, or the SEAL preparatory course. So if you want to even try to become a SEAL, before you even do SEAL training, you have to go through BUDS.
Yep. I watched that video from
and it's like
2000, I think.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And it's a great documentary if you haven't seen it. It's on YouTube. You can go find it. It's really entertaining. But yeah, I mean, what do they have those guys doing? It's just like hundreds and hundreds of push-ups. It's like they got to roll around in the sand on the surf for hours and hours. They got to run for just miles and miles. They got to go get on a boat and like haul it over their heads and run for it for more miles. It's all endurance based. And we see it in the movies too, right? You think about the military guy, like just enduring through, miles of trackless jungle. And
it's important. It's important. I want to say it's important because survival is an endurance game, if you really think about it,
Yes.
Torture is an endurance game. They got to make sure these guys can handle pain for long periods of time. I understand
Absolutely.
that.
Yes.
But you also got to realize too, and Rip is going to shoot me for saying this. For guys at that level, strength is not the limiting factor.
No,
no. They should get stronger. That's not me saying they shouldn't get stronger and they shouldn't learn how to move the way we teach people to move and they shouldn't do these lifts. They should definitely do these things. The analogy Rip gave once, he's like, Tom Brady should squat 500, and then I think the person he was talking to chuckled, but he's like, do you realize that is an NFL quarterback, that 500 is not heavy for an NFL quarterback? That's just a baseline,
Do you remember Vinny Testaverde? Who, by the way, played until in his mid 40s. He was a 500-600 squatter. He was a 500 squatter in his 40s. He was actually very serious about strength training.
So that's the greater point, right?
But, yeah.
That's a greater point. That segues to where I'm going with this. It's like these guys in special forces and professional sports, they're going to get injured. It's not a matter of when, not if, right? But if they trained in this way and kept themselves strong through these ergonomic, efficient movements. And we're not saying they should max out their strength gains because that's going to cause injuries too. These guys are very explosive and capable of doing a lot more than we are, you know? But just maintaining some level of strength, which for them is much higher than ours, could probably prevent some of those injuries, or they can tolerate them better. There's a lot of benefits to that. So I don't want to sit here and go on the record and say they shouldn't train. What I'm saying is for them, and I think that I don't want to give them too much credit because these government guys can be dumbasses, but I think intuitively the approach is, I think they have I think they communicate it very shitty, but what I think they're trying to say is that strength is not the limiting factor. These guys are already strong, right?
Yeah,
well, but it doesn't mean
I think that's 100% because when you look at the high levels, like we're not talking about basic infantry here. When you look at the Navy SEALs or the Army Rangers and stuff, the course, the sort of introductory courses that they have to go through to qualify, to just get their foot in the door. That doesn't mean they're going to get a contract, but to even get their foot in the door, it's basically it's a selection process. They're going to they're finding the athletes, and then they're finding the athletes who have the specific mental capacities that they're looking for, because there's a lot of guys that are hosses in the gym, physical specimens that don't make it because they just don't have the right mindset for what they need to do. But they're selecting. That's what it is. That's really what that's about. It's not a get you in shape for being a Navy SEAL. No. They're finding the guys who already can handle it, and for those guys, they're pretty damn strong. We know some of them that and I think about our buddy. Navy SEAL. Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on his name. You know who I'm talking about? He's in his 70s now.
Oh, Frank Sanders.
Yeah, Frank Sanders. Thank you. Yeah. So Frank, he's a really cool guy. But so Frank was a SEAL back in the day, and he's now in his early 70s, and he's accumulated quite a few injuries that he's had to have surgeries and stuff. But Frank is still pulling in the 400s, and he has pulled over 500 before in his 60s. And so the dude's an athlete.
He's a strong motherfucker. Yeah,
absolutely.
He's an athlete.
You look at the CrossFit guys, and those guys across the board. If they're in the games, most of those guys have a 500 to 600 deadlift.
Mm-hmm.
Even though is nowhere near their specialty, so they're pretty fucking strong.
Exactly. So I think they can benefit from technique because a lot of the time,
Sure.
these guys can learn technique very easily, but it doesn't mean they're just doing it right. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Or doing it in the best way. There's a lot of reasons. We're not going to do a whole episode on why athletes should train. That's a different episode.
Right.
But the reason I kind of went down that rabbit hole is because I'm simply acknowledging strength is not the limiting factor for them.
Yeah.
But it is for you. For you watching, you listening, it is the limiting factor for you more than endurance is.
Right.
And you need to let that sink in because at the end of the day, strength is the most basic fundamental physical attribute that drives everything else. Obviously, your muscles have to be able to produce force for you to move and do things, right? And right now, if you take somebody that's not very athletic, sits around all the time, and they're watching YouTube videos of Navy SEALs or Rich Froning, right? And they're like, I want to be like that guy. And they start doing CrossFit wads. 9 times out of 10, they either get no results or get hurt, right?
Right.
And it's because for them, that's not the problem. A lot of the time, they're under-muscled and they're deconditioned. Some basic level of conditioning and some targeted strength training is going to get them what they really want,
Yes.
But the emphasis is on this endurance stuff. I mean, people are more than willing to walk a marathon, right? But to get on a powerlifting platform and squat, 95 pounds, that seems like, oh no, I can't do that. I need to get stronger before I can do that.
Right.
There's just like this certain level of intimidation with performing a real heavy lift. And then on the other end of it, you get people who have experience with endurance competitions, whether they, went hard or walked it or whatever. And they'll sit there and say, oh, well, it's only 3 reps, and that just further communicates and highlights that they don't really have any experience, pushing themselves heavy. So, what does that feel like, right? An endurance activity, if you're really pushing it, it can make you want to puke. A bodybuilding workout, especially a leg workout, can make you want to puke, right?
Yeah.
And and that's celebrated for some reason to the point where, if I marketed my gym or an exercise program that was guaranteed to make you puke, I think I'd probably sell more memberships. There's a big market for this shit, and I don't know why.
It's true.
However, on the flip side of it, if I told somebody, you're going to come in here, I'm going to put a big weight on your back, and you're going to lift it, and you're going to feel like you're going to explode, and you might even shit your pants. They're going the other way, But
right,
if I say I'll make you puke with a leg workout, try to make me puke.
This guy's intense.
Try to make me puke. If I say I'm going to make you shit your pants, they might challenge that. But if I tell them how, and I say, oh, you're just going to lift a big heavy weight, I'm going to put fucking 400 pounds on your back and you're going to squat it, they'll be like, oh fuck that. I wouldn't do that to anybody, by the way. But I'm just giving a comparable apples example,
Right.
But if I told somebody, I want to give you a workout that'll make you shit your pants. First, they might say they don't believe it, but if I explain to them, you're going to lift the heaviest fucking weight you can lift, and it's going to make you feel like you're going to explode, and you're going to see stars at the end. That tends to shy people away more than I'm going to make you puke with a leg workout.
Yeah, right. It's funny, and again, back to my earlier point. I think I just have a feeling. I mean, there's no way to test this, but I have a feeling if we went back in time and we grabbed a bunch of teenagers who grew up in the fields doing farm work, they probably would intuitively understand this stuff. So let's talk about that a little bit more, like the experience of lifting heavy. So one of the things that you have to develop if you want to lift barbells is you have to learn how to brace for each lift. Mm-hmm. And the fancy term we use for this is the Valsalva technique. Valsalva. I hope the guy, I have no idea what the first name of the guy Valsalva that they named this after, but in my mind, he's got to be Antonio Valsalva.
That sounds pretty cool. Let me look it up.
Right? Yeah. So tell me who the actual Valsalva is we named this after. But anyway, a Valsalva is something that you do naturally, every day when you take a shit. Right? You basically take a breath and you bear down and you squeeze your abs. And what this does is this creates.
Dude, you were right.
Is it Antonio? It really
Antonio Maria Valsalva.
Oh my God! Yeah, I completely pulled that out of my ass. I just in my head, it's got to be Antonio.
Funny.
That's me. See,
he's a Northern Italian. Antonio Maria Valsalva.
That's fantastic. That's even better with the Maria in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, bless you, Antonio, for your contributions to modern exercise science. But yeah, so the thing is, like, you have to learn how to brace, and we do this all the time. We do this on the toilet. We do this if you ever have to like push something heavy. Like, you know, you got to move the couch across the room. You're going to push it across the room, or you break down in an intersection, and you got to get your truck out of the damn middle of the intersection. So that you're not going to get hit by oncoming traffic. Well, you're going to get behind that. You're going to throw it in neutral, get behind that truck, and you go, you're going to bear down and push. Right?
That's right.
So it's something we do naturally. But the thing about strength training is that we are progressively loading the body with a barbell. So when we start somebody and they squat on day one, and we show them the technique, we teach them how to move correctly, and we work them up to a reasonably challenging weight for day one. Say it's 135 pounds for this guy.
Right.
Well, we're going to add some weight to that bar every time he squats. And so what that means is that, you know, in a month, he's going to be squatting, you know, 200 maybe. In 2 months, he's going to be squatting 275 maybe, you know, somewhere around those. He's going to double his squat strength in 2 to 3 months. And so as the weight starts to climb, this guy has to learn how to brace against that heavy weight more and more and more and more. And every time you reach a new heavier weight, you have to learn how to just dial in that tension that you're creating in your body with the Valsalva one more notch. And I still have this. You know, I've been lifting for years, and I still have to find another notch when I'm getting to certain poundages. You know, when I squat 4 plates, I'm like, I have to find it in me to get one notch tighter than I'm used to when I'm squatting in the 300s for reps. It's a thing that's a very, very important skill, is learning how to generate that tension in your body. And that is something I feel like is very unique to strength training, that you're never going to develop from endurance training. You're never going to develop that from sport training, except maybe in like a couple of instances. Like, I've noticed wrestlers tend to be really good at that, but you know, that's not many other sports where you really have to do that kind of work.
You could probably speak to this, and this is gonna. Well, let me segue to my topic, and I'll come back to it because this is relevant to your experiences. But you know, the other thing too is when you're training for strength and you're lifting heavy, and you know, I'm going to say 5 or less reps, right? Yeah, it's only 5. Yeah, well, do them. You know, put enough weight on it to make it a hard set of 5. It's not the same as a hard set of 15. I don't give a shit what the EMG says. EMG doesn't measure force production. Anyhow, let's say you're doing 5 or less reps, right? It's anxiety provoking too, you know, especially on a squat, especially on a squat. Put a bar on your back, and then it feels, you know, it's to double your body weight, you know, can get up to that point if you're a man, you know, can get up to that point if you're a woman too, but to definitely with, you know, men under 40 can get up to that if they train and eat and do what they're supposed to do. You can have double your body weight on there. You know, I think I've gotten up to 2.5, you know, but let's even say 1.5. I mean, it's over your body weight on your back plus your body weight, right?
Right.
It's anxiety provoking, you know. People lose sleep over it, you know. Like they have people fucking basically lose sleep because they knew they had to squat heavier in 2 days, you know.
Yes.
And you just don't get that when you have to, you know, casually run, you know, 10 miles, or if you're doing a hypertrophy workout, quote unquote hypertrophy, and you're doing like, you know, 8 to 15 reps, right? It's not the same thing. You're not going to lose sleep over that. You might dread it and be like, oh fuck, this is going to burn. I'm going to want to vomit at the end. This sucks, you know. But, you know, you probably won't lose sleep over it. But when you know you have to do a set of 5, and it's hard, and you've done hard sets of 5 leading up to it, I'm not talking about your first day in the gym. I'm saying that you hit 355 for 5 as a man, or 185 for 5 as a woman, and you know you got to do, you know, 360 the week after, or 190. Or, you know, you can go up even higher with those numbers when you start getting into outliers, right?
Yes.
But, you know, you have to do more, and then you lose sleep over it because you barely got it the last time, and you have to add now, right? But, you know, if you went for 12 and you got 11, you're like, you know, try it again. You know, maybe get it next time, you know. Or maybe I'll just drop down to 10s, you know. Or, God, that sucked. Do I really have to repeat this? It fucking burned and I wanted to vomit. And, you know, it's not the same as, well, fuck, I want to get it and I don't want to get it. Because if I get it, that means I have to do 5 more pounds, you know?
Right.
And it's because of that experience of this crushing weight. You take the bar out of the rack, it's on your back, you feel like your whole body's going to crush. And then when you're going down, The eccentric is worse than the concentric because it feels
Yes.
way heavier. You have no idea what it's going to feel like coming up. So the anxiety continues on the descent, and then you come up, feels like it's not moving. You watch the video, it's coming right up like a warm up, and then you do four more, and you get your set of 5, and then you're like, fuck, I got it. I got to add weight next week,
Right.
And that can apply to any lift. For me, it's the squat is what I think of when I think of that sequence of events. Most people can relate to that. You get some weird motherfuckers that like squatting, but a lot of us have had that. Or a deadlift, right? You're picking it up, and it doesn't even feel like it's moving, and then all of a sudden it's off the floor, and then it feels like it's moving slow, and then all of a sudden you've blocked it out and you did 5 more. The joke that I have is, people use perceived exertion. They say RPE 10 is failure, right? I feel like every deadlift rep is to failure after a certain point. After 315, they're all quote unquote RPE 10.
Yeah, there's the deadlift is particularly brutal because it's just a hard concentric drive off the floor. There's no rebound to speak of. Technically there's a little bit after that first rep. When you put the bar down, you generate a little stretch reflex in your hamstrings and glutes, but it's not like a squat. Like a squat. Yeah. Like I squatted heavy today. I squatted 340 for a set of 5. I fucking smoked it too. Like I could have done sets across. Like
I have to do sets across with that in a little bit. This sucks.
Yeah, and it's it's not near my PR, but it's getting heavier for me based on my last few months of training, and but the thing is, like today, I was just feeling good, and my balance was very good. Last time I attempted this 2 weeks ago, I was just, my balance was all off. Everything was off that day. It was just a horrible training day, and I only got 3. Actually, I failed the 4th rep because I just got off balance. I had the strength there. But anyway, today it flew, right? It really was not that hard. But the thing is, like, I got a little bit of a bounce out of it. I got a really, really good rebound out of the bottom. And you can do that on a squat. On a deadlift, there's no rebound. Come on. It's just, everything's just heavy. It never gets like a squat. You can groove it to where you're like 340 might feel like ass, but then 345, you groove it better. You get a better rebound out of the bottom. You're like, that wasn't so bad. With the deadlift, like you said, 405, oh my God, this is like 1,000,000 pounds. 410, it's 1,000,000 pounds plus 5. It's just
450. It's 1.5 million. I mean, fuck me.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Like they all start feeling the same.
Yeah, exactly. So, but this is part of the experience of lifting is learning how to manage your body in those conditions, and I think that's a really useful skill. That's something that lifting teaches you that very few other things will. And I've found that if I can learn how to control my body and execute the lift like I know how to do it in a hard set of 5, then that carries over to the rest of life. Like I'm anything else that I do that's more submaximal, I can handle it better. So like if I'm really tired and I'm climbing a hill in a hike, and I'm tired because I'm at the top of the hill and maybe I've been hiking for like 6, 7, 8, 10 miles. And my legs are burning, and I'm kind of out of gas, I can control my body's position better because I have gotten used to handling squatting very, very heavy. This is the mental skill of dealing with that, and I think that's really useful, and that's something that I don't really get from anything else besides strength training.
It forces you to become emotionally mature to make more progress. You have to be, because that fear, it triggers the fight or flight response every time, when it's heavy. Even when it's not heavy, but it feels heavy, right? And there's that whole thing, you have to ignore it and go for it and ignore how it feels and keep going until you've reached the target number of reps or your muscles have legitimately fallen short and can't complete them, right? We're not going to say failed. We don't fail reps, we miss reps, right?
That's right.
Like, you have to control your emotions. Like you go in there, like I don't want to squat 400 plus. I hate it. Fucking hate it, man, when it gets that heavy.
Right. Yeah.
But I go into it. Yeah.
The butterflies, man. Yeah.
And you have to manage that. And I took a sports psychology class in my master's, and they called it somatic anxiety. That's the butterflies, right? And they said somatic anxiety could be productive for performance, because you can leverage that energy to perform at a high level, right? Or you can let it get out of control, and then you end up missing reps or performing at a lower level in any type of sport, right? And that applies to anything, like performing, as a musician or anything, right? You get that, right? So you can leverage that and harness that to express your peak performance in that moment. And that's something that like I've always been kind of good at naturally. Like I didn't have to learn that. It was cool hearing that conceptually because I looked back on it and I'm like, yeah, when it's time to go, I just fucking go, like that's just kind of what I do, and it's hard to coach that. And of course, when you're just good at something, it's hard to explain it to somebody else. You haven't had to troubleshoot it, right? And fortunately, I've had to in a couple specific scenarios, mostly outside of the weight room. But for the most part, it's time to go, just go. And then I just kind of release that into what I'm doing, So that's like a whole nother layer of it, right? You're not going to get that with a set of 15 because when you do rep 1, it's doable, right? You don't start feeling fucking emotional distress until the very end, but by then you've done 11 reps, or 8 reps if it's a set of 10, or 7 reps if it's a set of 8, right?
Right.
And there's no having to get yourself ready for it. You're already pushing through. You have momentum behind you, right? That whole getting started and attacking it.
Yes.
You don't get to experience that when you do a set of 15 because let's say you try to do that, psych yourself up, you're like, oh shit, that first rep was easy, Then by the time it's stressful, you're, deaf, dumb, and stupid. You're not even paying attention anymore. Right. You're just trying to get done, So, you lose out on that. You lose out on that, and it scares a lot of people. It scares a lot of people, and it's just led to this business model of saying it doesn't matter now. Strength doesn't matter. Well, it does fucking matter because strength drives everything. Especially in the weight room. The idea that developing that neuromuscular efficiency is not necessary to build muscle is laughable too, because a lot of the guys that say that did that to build muscle, especially in their earlier years, but that just doesn't make sales, You don't sell magazines or you don't sell social media subscriptions or app subscriptions, wherever the fuck people are trying to make money off of it. It doesn't really sell when you tell people you have to lift something heavy, and the risk of injury is higher when you lift something heavy, and the technical aspect of the lift is more demanding when you lift something heavy, right? You can't get away with as much. You actually have to have a lot of skin in the game to get good at lifting heavy, and it's skill based too, so it doesn't really have to do with your muscles as much as it has to do with skill. I've heard all this stupid shit. I've heard all this dumb shit. And maybe it's true if, like we said earlier, if you're a Navy SEAL, you're a Rich Froning, or you're a professional athlete, that strength is not the limiting factor. Sure, that's true, but you benefit from the technique work and you benefit from the lift still. It's a whole other topic, like I said. But, for you, the listener, the average person, right, it is the limiting factor. You're not that fucking strong, Like the guy who's telling you that is repping out weights that you may never even max out. You may never even max them out. And the athlete that you're worshiping, his baseline is higher than what you'll do in 2 years,
Yep.
So strength is the limiting factor. Just because it's not for them doesn't mean it's not for you.
Right. And, so some folks are not as concerned about getting super jacked, right?
Right. Most folks they're just, are not concerned about getting super jacked.
That's right. Yeah. But they're not even necessarily for the physique changes so much as it is like, hey, I just want to be healthy. I want to be like functional.
Trent, I was never concerned about being super jacked.
Yeah.
I just wanted to gain enough muscle for evidence. Yeah, if I was concerned about being super jacked, I'd have a couple needles in my ass right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's same here, man. That's Yeah. So, but the thing is, like this. I like the way you said that earlier. The emotional maturity that you gain from this. Mm-hmm. This is really underrated, and people don't talk about this enough about strength training because it's something that you really can't understand until you've done it, until you've been through a novice linear progression and you've been at the end of it. When, like you said before, you're like you hit whatever it is. Maybe it's for you. Maybe it's 255, and you're like, oh my god. That was really hard.
I mean, it might be 225.
260. It might be 225. Yeah.
I have a young guy right now struggling with 225. Doing back offset. And he's gained the weight too. He's doing the program. It's just,
absolutely.
It varies, people.
Yes, it does. And the beautiful thing, though, is the experience does not vary. There's a great story out there. I've heard a bunch of different versions of it. I believe it's true. That at a workshop, Ed Cohn, the greatest power lifter of all time, probably. This is a guy that squatted 1,000 pounds at a body weight of 220. Mm-hmm. He squatted 900 something at a body weight of 198. Just incredible power lifter. Just
deadlifted 902 with the hands between the legs, but 888. He deadlifted 888 legitimate.
Conventional, yeah. Incredibly strong. So he was fielding questions, and some kid asked him, what does it feel like to squat 900 pounds? When he was like, he thought about it for a second, and he asked him, he's like, well, what's your max? And the kid says, 350.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, feels like that. and so I think he wasn't joking, right? It was a serious thing.
Debatable, but go on.
But I think that his point was that for that kid, a balls out 350 max squat, it's the same experience as Ed Cohn going for a balls out 950 squat or whatever, right?
I mean,
of course, the adaptations that Ed Cohn has gone through to squat 950 are there's a whole magnitude of difference between that and the kid squatting 350 in terms of the physical adaptations. But the experience of it, the subjective experience of it is the same. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the beautiful thing about this is it doesn't matter what you're lifting as long as you're pushing your limits and lifting heavy for you, you can gain these benefits.
Should we try to get him on here?
Oh, it'd be awesome. He seems like a cool dude. There's a starting strength coach I think he's based out of Chicago. That trains has trained. I don't think he does anymore, but he used to train at Lance's gym. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that where Ed Cohn hangs out?
Yep.
Yeah. And he says he's talked to him a bunch of times. He said he's super cool, and he even like yelled a couple of cues at him during one of his squat sets. It's pretty badass to have Ed Cohn coach you.
So I met Ed at the Olympia in 2022,
mm-hmm.
and we connected because I'm from Chicago. And we talked, and he's like, "Send me a video." I answer everything, so he's helped me with my bench a little bit on DMs. But when I came home for Christmas this year, I messaged him. I wanted to train, and he was going to meet me. Then he got COVID. But he hooked it up with Lance, and I got in there and I trained with one of my clients that goes there, and she knows him and she knows Lance, and she's a member, but kind of shows up once every so often, because it's out of her way. Yeah, I'd like to go. If I go back home and talk to him in person, I'll try to see if I can get him on here. I think it'd be cool.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yeah.
He's an interesting dude because he's gifted for, he's built for powerlifting and nothing else, and, his programming approach kind of checks out with what a lot of us end up doing, The guy was known for running these classical periodization models. For those of you who don't know what that means, basically you start with higher reps, lower weight, and work towards heavy weight, lower reps, right? So tens, eights, fives, triples, singles, right? He did singles, Rip did doubles, Rip didn't like singles in the gym. But, he was known for running those, and apparently, I don't think he's lying. He doesn't come across as that kind of guy. He never missed a rep in training because he was very careful about his planning, and he didn't really have ego in it. And he was known to hand off number selection to handlers because he didn't want to
know what was on the bar.
He didn't want to know what was on the bar. He's just like, I just lift what they put on there,
Right, yeah,
and,
sure.
And then he would say things like, you lift the heavy ones like they're light, the light ones like they're heavy,
Yeah, yep.
So, I've heard a lot of good, solid pieces of gold come out of his mouth, and that's very rare for a gifted athlete, I've watched some of his videos. I'd say he's pretty decent at explaining some of the technique, not to the level that Rip is, I hope he's not listening, but, but the thing is, usually with a gifted athlete, you expect garbage. And, when I've watched this stuff, I'm like, yeah, this stuff is spot on. Like with me, with the bench, raise the sternum, simple cue, worked.
Yeah, right.
Fix my back on the bench, which is my limiting factor. So I like the way he teaches, and you just don't get that from somebody that's been at the top as a performer,
Right.
I think he just likes being around it. He likes lifting, he likes coaching, he likes reading about it,
He's clearly thought a lot about the experience of lifting and through the eyes of other people, because again, I'll never know what it's like to squat 900.
No.
But he's clearly thought about what it's like for the kid squatting 350 and then and trying to come up with ways to explain how to dial in his mindset. And you can't underrate that. There's the technique is important. Absolutely. We are technique coaches. That is the basis of what we do with the starting strength model is getting people to move correctly. But there's a mindset element too. And you have to learn how to attack the bar and, be assertive. And that only happens from doing it and running the program. And
You know,
one thing I'll say on that, just because I think this is something I've learned from our friend Dr. Pewter, the psychiatrist, is really what it is a linear progression where you're adding weight to the bar, a small amounts of weight on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
It's exposure without danger, right? So that fear that you get from squatting 260 for the first time, it's scary as fuck for sure. But you can go back through your logbook and remind yourself, like, yeah, but you already squatted 255 and you squatted 250 and you squatted 245 before that and 240 and all the way down, right? So there's this long line of evidence that you can squat 260, right? And I've even, when people get freaked out in the gym, I've even made people go to the weight tree and pick up a 5-pound plate and just hold that. You'd be like, hey, 5 pounds, right?
Yeah.
That's what it feels like, right? It's not that much, right? They're like, yeah, it's light. That's all you got to do. You've basically already done the weight before. You can do it. You just got to add 5 little pounds. That's it. But it's exposure without danger, right? We're not making huge increases here that we're not confident that you can make. We're confident here. And that's how you develop this mindset. That's how you train yourself. And it's a skill just like anything else. You have to learn it through regular practice. Yeah.
The more I listen to you and the more I talk about this in this episode, the more I think about how what we're really talking about is dealing with fear here, right?
Yeah.
With endurance, I think you're dealing with pain,
Yes. Yeah. I would agree.
Endurance activities, especially hard ones, not just walking the marathon, like trying to run it as fast as you can for the whole 26 miles, to the extent that you can, obviously. Because, people don't realize marathon runners that are really good at it, they are running just shy of a sprint for 26 miles. The really good ones.
Yes. Yeah.
Think about that. They get so good at gaming it, they want to get their speed up to a point where they're just right next to a sprint, but not quite, because if they sprint, then they're done,
Right.
And, I didn't realize that till I had to sit through an academic program that was, more focused on exercise physiology. So a lot of exercise physiology, probably up until recently, was focused on endurance and cardiopulmonary responses to exercise. And a lot of the instructors had an endurance background. So I usually zoned out on things, but that was one of those things that kind of like jumped out, right? And by zone out, I mean, I wasn't interested, but I was interested in the physiology, obviously. But the, endurance stuff, when they talk about sports, just not my thing, But that one jumped out at me. It's like, these guys are running as fast as they can without sprinting for fucking 26 miles, 2 to 3 hours,
I mean, if you look at the paces of the world record times, it's like 4 minutes and a little bit of change. That's like the 4-minute mile not that long ago was the best 1 mile race. These guys are running 4 minutes and 20 seconds for 26 miles.
It's fucking crazy, man. So, to bring that point home, endurance training teaches you how to deal with pain. Strength training teaches you how to deal with fear, Yeah. And I think a lot of us, just by the nature of being a living organism on this planet, we're forced to deal with pain, obviously, throughout our lives, some more than others. Women especially if they have had children, But you can go through life and avoid dealing with fear or dealing with a lot of it, right? Confronting that is a whole nother animal. And, we've all had to at certain points, but it's not, I don't think we are forced to confront fear as much as we're forced to confront pain.
Right.
Because you never know when you're going to get hurt, but you can live a cautious lifestyle and avoid things that are going to scare the shit out of you, right? When you're lifting a heavy weight, 5 reps or less, close to failure, right? Muscular failure. Remember, there's no failure if you show up. 5 reps or less, close to muscular failure, volitional failure, as the academics call it, whatever word you want to use, right? You're going to be dealing with fear. If you're doing a set of 15 to 20, you're going to be dealing with pain. If you're running a marathon, you're going to be dealing with pain, And it's a good skill to have, right? You should be able to deal with pain. Endurance exercise is not a waste of time. You'll never hear me say that. It's useful, and it teaches you things. But a lot of those things you're going to accidentally encounter, right? That doesn't mean don't do it. I'm just saying, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to trip, you're going to get sick, have a stomach ache, things are going to happen, you might fall off your bike, you might eat shit on a trail, there's a lot of things that can happen that will make you feel physical pain, but fear is something you can hide from a little bit easier, and getting under a bar and doing a set of 5 that you don't think you'll get and finishing it. And then knowing you have to add 5 pounds in a predetermined number of days, 2 days from now, 4 days from now, 7 days from now, that's going to elicit some fear, and it makes sense when you look at the physiological responses when you look at the sorry, because I burped. Let me redo that. So that makes sense when you look at the physiological responses to strength training, right? Or lifting weights at high intensities. Your blood pressure shoots through the roof, number 1. You dump more adrenaline acutely, number 2.
Yeah.
Your heart rate goes up for different reasons than it does when you run for long periods of time, right? So if you're running for long periods of time in a steady state, your heart rate kind of goes up steadily along with your oxygen consumption, right? And that's because your heart needs more oxygen to keep pumping blood out to all the tissues so that you can keep exercising, right? That's how endurance exercise works. Strength exercise, your heart rate goes up because you've dumped a bunch of adrenaline, so it has nothing to do with the need for more oxygen. That's why it's silly to sit there and look at heart rate as a proxy for computing calories on a wearable. You can't compute calories for strength training on a wearable. I ranted about that the first attempt at this episode, but I'm going to save that for a different episode.
Yeah.
But my point is, think about those responses. What are the cardiovascular responses to fear? High blood pressure acutely, which means it goes up pretty high. Heart rate goes up really high, right? You're dumping a bunch of adrenaline, right? So all these things happen, right? And it's not steady. It's just a sharp rise, whereas with endurance, those things do happen, but it's over a more steady timeline, and it doesn't get quite as high, right? Blood pressure during a VO2 max test doesn't reach the same level as during, a max leg press. That's what they've measured. They haven't done it they may have done it during a max squat. I don't know, but the research papers on Valsalva maneuver and blood pressure responses to lifting are usually leg press, which can get it pretty high. I mean, look at the position you're in for one. But even so, I'm sure in a squat it wouldn't be much different. The point is, it gets much higher than it would during an endurance activity, and it happens faster, right? So all those things are the same responses to fear. If a bear tries to kill you, if somebody puts a gun to your head, right? Same types of responses. So, I may not have a way to measure this, have a p-value for you, have a peer-reviewed citation for you, but it's pretty clear that if you're lifting heavy, you will be dealing with fear on a fairly regular basis. And I think that's probably the reason it's off-putting to a lot of people, why it's not as marketable. It's like, I really want to scare the shit out of myself every couple days, Right. That's what happens after month 2, You get through month 2, the, neuromuscular adaptations are done, you know how to move, you're getting used to weight, and all of a sudden it's like, well, it feels heavy on my back, this must be the last one, and then you have to do that 16, 18, 20 more times,
Right, yeah.
with 5 more pounds each time,
Exactly.
So,
yeah, and what happens, though, over the years is, your work capacity increases.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means in practical terms is that you can get under a bar and squat a heavy set of 5, and all those effects that you just described, they occur. Like you rack that set of 5 and you're like, your heart's pounding, you go sit down. But then, with years of training under your belt, 4 or 5 minutes go by and you're like, okay, I'm ready. And you've returned to baseline again, and you're fine, right? You're ready to go again.
Yeah.
The first time you do that, the first time you encounter a really heavy set of 5, that's getting close to your limit, you're sitting there and your heart's pounding, and 5 minutes go by and you're like, man, I'm just blasted, right? That adrenaline dump you're still feeling. And that's part of why the end of the novice linear progression gets so hard, is because you're just, you don't have the work capacity yet to handle those sets across. And that's something you develop over time as you get into more intermediate programming. And we don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but that just kind of shows you in practical terms, what this does for you over time is what strength training does for you over time is it builds your ability to handle a short, intense experience like that and return to baseline in a few minutes. And that has practical carryover too. when you're out, I've done a lot of the last 2 years. I've done a lot of, gosh, I don't want to call it like farm work because I don't have a farm or anything like that. But I have a small homestead, little mini homestead around here. So we have chickens and gardens and stuff. But you got to haul like heavy ass equipment. Sometimes you got to haul like basically chainsaw a tree apart and haul a bunch of logs and stuff.
Yep.
And I actually encounter a lot of this type of work. I could pick up a big heavy log, walk it up a hill and like dump it into the area where we're trying to like put all the wood, and then go back down and do it again and do it again. And you do like a couple hours of this work and you start getting tired because this you're moving some heavy stuff. And then when you get tired like that, that's where your chance of injury starts to go up because you might twist an ankle because you just lose your balance. And it's not the tired that's like I'm out of breath. It's the tired of like, man, I'm hitting some combination of muscular failure and and cardiovascular failure here. But having lifted, I'm much more in control of my body in a state of fatigue than I used to be, and I'm much more stable out there moving stuff. Because even if I'm picking up 100-pound log, that's nowhere near what I've picked up on a barbell, and so that 100-pound log is very manageable. And I found that to be really practical. That's something that's come in handy quite a bit in this type of work.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why we want people doing this because it's highly functional. We're not training power lifters. We're trying to get you strong so that when you have to do things, you know how to do things. Somebody says, "Hey, I need help. You're moving a bunch of furniture off carpet because we need to clean the carpet." You're the first person they look at.
No problem.
Or even if they don't know you can do it, you're the first person to volunteer. And your back feels fine afterwards. You sleep at night the next day, normal as can be.
Right. Yes.
So that's what we're doing. Power lifters, their job is to move weight from point A to point B. And that can be done a variety of different ways, and not all of those ways involve using the most muscle mass through the longest effective range of motion that allows you to lift the most weight, assuming those first two criteria are met. Right? You can move a weight 3 inches, and it's legal in powerlifting. Right? I don't want you doing that though, because you're not going to build a lot of muscle doing that, right?
No.
So that's kind of what we do here, and part of that is going to involve willingly facing your fear. In this case, your fear of the barbell. It's natural. You're going to feel it. It's over a long enough timeline. You're going to feel it, and guess what? When actual fears present themselves, I think you'll be better at managing them. I sure as hell have been.
Yeah. I think that's unquestionable in my life. I've definitely felt, I'll share this as a closing thought. Years ago, when I first started training, I was working in the corporate world, and I worked in corporate finance, as we would say. Pinkies up, finance. And I was going through a really hard time in my life. I had lost a lot of self-confidence because I'd gotten into this field where I did okay in my first few years of working in finance, and I changed jobs. I moved to a new place, and I was in a very difficult job that, looking back on, was a shitty job. But then also I handled it very shittily. I didn't have a lot of emotional experience, and I wasn't able to handle competing priorities and very big personalities on the two bosses that I had. I had two bosses, like in Office Space, and I was really struggling. I got very depressed, and I completely lost the self-confidence that I had. And at some point in this process, working that job, I hung in there. I started strength training, and I discovered all this stuff. And I will never forget, at the time I was taking public transportation to get to work, because I worked downtown, and I was on the tram, it was kind of light rail train. And it was busy. And one day I had my gym stuff with me, and I was in my business clothes, and I'm walking down. I'm just looking for a spot to sit down, and there's like people in the way and stuff, and like a couple people just like turn and look at me, and they like get out of the way. They like move out of the way for me as I'm walking down the aisle. And look, I'm a small guy. All you 6'4" motherfuckers, you're just like, yeah, everybody does that, right? Like, no, it's not true. I'm 5'8" and I have a smallish frame. I'm not a big guy. I've never been a big guy. Trust me, this does not happen to 5'8" people. This is not experience we're used to. But these people like moved out of the way for me. And I'm like, it was just a weird thing. I'd never experienced that before. And I realized afterwards, I was like, oh, I guess I'm carrying myself differently than I used to. I'm like walking around with some confidence and uprightness, and I've gained some physical size too. And that just kind of like, it was just this little moment, but that's really blew my mind. And then that led to, over the course of the next year, slowly I gained a lot more confidence and I gained a lot more assertiveness in my work life and learned how to set some boundaries and get that job to an acceptable position. And then I left and I started my own business, and that's what I'm doing now. But that transformation, I have strength training to owe that transformation. That was a huge element of it. I couldn't have done any of what I did had I not developed that confidence and assertiveness that I got from learning how to lift heavy weights.
Right.
So in my life, at least, it's had a lot of effects outside of just, muscles and athletic performance.
No, the experience in and of its own, it changes you, and it has carry over to other situations, like I said. And when you're just exercising in the gym, chasing a pump, fucking around, toying around in front of mirrors. I can't believe how people do that shamelessly now in the locker room. I mean, I go to a commercial gym sometimes, to use the machines, and these guys are all, if I wanted to do that, I'd have to wait in line for a mirror. I'm like, this is unbelievable. I used to do that on the DL where nobody was around, let me flex a little bit. But now they're all just sitting there, and then dudes behind dudes doing it. I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah, some guys hitting the back double by, and the other guy's like, wait, let me get in the other corner to check my triceps out.
Dude, I can't even sneak one in on the DL. I cannot enjoy the gym lighting anymore because I'm not going to do it in front of fucking bunch of dudes that are half naked,
Right, and it's amazing because it's like, all these 5'10", 185 guys and acting like they're fucking Jay Cutler, checking out their lat spread
literally
in the mirror.
Have you been to a commercial gym lately?
Oh yeah. My where my folks live, there's a Globo gym down the road. So if I want to get a workout in when I'm visiting, I usually go there.
So this is nationwide.
It is. Oh yeah. This 100%. That's
dude. When we were that age, you had to hide that.
Yeah. I remember the bodybuilders, and I'm saying bodybuilders, not like necessarily the pro bodybuilders, although they did this too, but just your amateur dude, the big dudes at the gym. They would wear sweats when they worked.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, they would wear sweats. You could not see their body, and I think the whole point was they wanted to hide that shit so they could just focus on the work when they were getting prepped for competition shape or whatever they do. Then they would take those off and wear the stringer tanks. But in the gym it was usually sweats.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I remember I'd see pictures in the muscle mags, and those guys would have sweats on, but when I'd see them at the, they'd have stuff with the stringers too, of course, for the photo shoots. But I remember seeing pictures of that where they had a hoodie on and they were in the weight room, and it looked like just an actual picture, not a pose,
Right.
But I wouldn't see too many of those guys in the normal commercial gyms, but when I would, they were wearing sweats. You're right.
Yeah.
They're always wearing sweats.
And that's how you knew that they were fucking serious, because those guys probably had the real physiques.
Yeah, dude. It's just, but now then I go in the locker room and I didn't see that, you'd sit there and you wait till the coast was clear, try to get the good gym lighting, and now you're waiting in line. It's like, take a ticket,
Right. Oh my God.
But, I don't know how I got on that, but it just, popped in my head. But, I know I got on that. Yeah. If you're doing all that kind of stuff, then it's recreation, there's, there's not a whole lot of developmental aspect to that. If you're a competitor, obviously there is, because, you're dealing with pain as a bodybuilder, for sure. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with pain. And if you're one of the best ones, you've also dealt with fear. All the top guys have lifted heavy, Mm-hmm.
Yep.
They've all went to low reps. A lot of them have competed in powerlifting. Arnold did, Ronnie did, Dorian did, Franco did, they all did. Jay Cutler benched 405 for 10,
Yep. Deadlifted 600 something, squatted 7.
Yeah. They've all done this, So we're not talking about them. We're talking about these guys at the gym that read their programs, that they're not even following, by the way, and that the competitor probably doesn't even follow either,
Yeah.
But they're reading these programs either on social media or online or wherever. I don't know where people get this stuff anymore. It used to be magazines in my day. But they're reading this stuff, and then they're doing a fraction of it, and they're not letting it get really hard, And you're losing out, Like, there's a lot of value to experiencing fear and confronting it and getting through it and doing that repetitively. And guess what? When you go and do the reps later, if that's what you want to go spend your time doing, it's not as bad,
No.
It's just not as bad. You can reproduce your reps better too. Like I do 10s. They're fairly reproducible. Squats a little bit harder, they might get high at the end. I'm working on that, but I don't think I'll ever do 8s or 10s again anyways. But when they got really heavy, the depth got a little questionable, but I was able to hold my back for most of them. I didn't have a problem holding my back. And that's because I've been lifting heavy all these years, So yeah, endurance becomes a limiting factor when when you add reps to it. But if you've been lifting heavy for years and years and years, repping out a hard set of 8 or 10, you're going to get most of those reps pretty much the same,
Yeah. Yeah.
But if that's all you're doing, 8s and 10s, and you haven't had that neuromuscular experience, then you're going to lose out, is what I'm saying. You're going to struggle with it. You're not going to get stronger. It's going to be harder to get bigger. That's my 2 cents on it. I think I've beaten this to hell. I'm getting to that point where my brain's mushing out and I have nothing more to add on this except,
I squatted heavy earlier today. So,
I got to do it now, but I'm doing that weight for sets across, brother.
Yeah, I know. Well, hopefully that's helpful. We realize that, there's a lot of folks listening who are pretty new to this. And, maybe they've been in the gym, maybe you've been in the gym for a while, but you haven't actually gone through this strength training process that we're describing. And if you do it, this is an important part of the game. Unfortunately, I don't think there's enough resources about the mental aspect of lifting heavy, but it's an important part of the game. And if you're serious about this and you want to go there, you're going to have to deal with it. So hopefully that's helpful. And kind of setting some expectations and some strategies for what to do when you reach that point. Last thing I'll say there is, there's something to be said about having a good training partner here. When you have a good training partner who's there, your battle buddy, then you don't want to bitch out on your heavy squats in front of your battle buddy, right? There's something to be said about that. So if you don't have a good training partner, they're hard to find, but if you can find one, hang on to them.
Or a good training environment.
Yeah,
we talked about that
same
a couple
thing.
episodes ago. Yeah,
that's right. So, all right. Well, let's close this one out.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you for tuning in to the Weights and Plates podcast. We appreciate all of our listeners and all of our new listeners. You can find me at weightsandplates.com, or if you are in Metro Phoenix, you can find me at Weights and Plates Gym. It shows up on Google, but it's just south of the airport near 32nd Street and Broadway. We offer private training and memberships, but if you want a membership, you have to do a private training session so that everybody's lifting the same and we don't have silly bullshit in here. You can find me online for online coaching at the website or on Instagram at _Robert_Santana, or the gym has a page at weights _and _plates.
Bam. There you go. Well, you can find me on Instagram at marmalade_cream. That's where I post about both my lifting, my coaching, and my audio production business that I run. If you have questions specifically about online coaching or training, you just want to ask me a question, you can send me an email at jonesbarbellclub@gmail.com. All right, we'll talk to you again in a couple weeks.